Hey there, and welcome to Go Far Girl, the podcast where women share the stories that changed them, one journey at a time. I'm your host, Chantel. I'm a travel writer and a lifelong wanderer, and I believe that every mile we travel brings us closer to the strongest, boldest, most authentic versions of ourselves. Each week, I'll sit down with incredible women to talk about the trips that shaped them, the lessons they learned along the way, and the power of going far in every sense of the word. So grab your coffee, your journal, or your carry-on, and let's dive in.
So today we're here with Natalie, and you guys are going to love her stories. She homeschools her kids. They travel all over the United States, hiking through national parks and doing all sorts of hands-on learning throughout the US. So that's amazing. Natalie's story really felt like a call to me for anyone who's ever wondered, like, what would happen if I just took that leap? And she just ditched her job, packed up the kids, and headed out and hasn't turned back. So I'm really excited for you guys to hear what she has to say about that. A little about Natalie is that she worked as an English professor for more than a decade before stepping away and homeschooling her kid. She's very good at writing resumes. You guys can hit her up for that if you need a little brush up on your resume. Thank you for being with us today. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. So I know that your story starts out in the classroom, but can you walk us through that moment where you first started envisioning your life looking a little bit differently than it was?
Yeah, so I had been, as you mentioned, I'd been a college professor for quite a long time. And, you're always on that system, right? Where we were actually on the quarter system where I taught down in Charleston. And so your life revolves around the next 7 weeks. And so in some ways that's very good because everything is set out for you. It's always planned. I would teach the same classes pretty much over and over again because you kind of get slotted. I was one of the professional writing people, but we taught a lot of English 101, a lot of English 102, which was our American, kind of like our American literature writing class. And so, in some ways, once you get the lectures and everything set, it's on autopilot, which, you of course have different students come in and out, but the actual material doesn't really change that much from quarter
Right.
to quarter. So this does get very samey after a while. And I have always been one to not want samey. And this is something that my husband, who is a tried and true, he likes the samey. He is a banker. He is all about the spreadsheet. He loves consistency. Whereas I'm like, man, it's been 3 years. Let's do something different. So
Yeah.
I've been the one that's like, we need to move to this other place. We need to go here. And he's like, but what's wrong with where we currently? Nothing's wrong. I just want something different. So we had moved around Charleston for a while, which is where I'm from, but we had just stayed in that area. And let's see, this would have been around the pandemic, around 2020. We were all home. We were doing online teaching. My husband was doing all the PPP loans through his banking. We had both of our kids at home doing the homeschool hybrid thing where they were, calling in
Yeah.
on
Madness.
everything. It was chaos because all four of us, we were actually selling our house and having it renovated.
Of course. Of course.
And it was funding this whole thing, but we were already in the middle of it. And so we moved back to Mount Pleasant, which is the part of Charleston that I'm from. And the housing market there skyrocketed, and it still is. It is insane what is happening in Charleston right now. And so we moved into this house that was it was such a cute house, and it was in a great neighborhood. I mean, like on the surface, everything looked perfect. We both had great jobs. The kids really enjoyed the school they were going to, but because the cost of living ended up just skyrocketing from Mount Pleasant, from like when I was a kid, there were 4,000 people living there. There's nearly 100,000 people living there now.
Oh, wow.
The median house price is over $1 million. It's insane to me what's happening in my hometown right now. And so a lot of it we came down and we were starting to have these big conversations like, did our lifestyle fit the life we actually want to live? Because we're just doing the whole 2 income, kids in school, day in, day out kind of thing. And are we living to work or are we working to live? And it really came down to that idea of there could be more than this. And so we had many, many, many conversations in like the late 2021, early 2022. We saw the housing market kind of skyrocket. We're like, we're not stuck in Mount Pleasant. Like my family lives there, but they can travel, we can travel, we can move. And so we made the decision to actually move it's about 90 miles outside of Charleston up to the country in the middle of nowhere, which is where my husband's extended family is from. And that's where we ended up. We bought this farmhouse that was built around 1900. We've rehabbed it, but because the cost of living here is so much lower, I didn't have to work. I was able to come home, take care of my kids, homeschool them, and then to use that time to build my blog and to then go travel with them to really reinforce what we were learning. So it was a slow and steady process, I guess, rather than just one light bulb moment, though there were many, many, many lectures that I thought, I really would like to be doing something other in the future. Or whatever. You don't love
As they're asleep and drooling in the classroom, and they're just like, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, it was a very slow realization that we could do this, that just because we're on this path right now doesn't mean that we can't get off this path and make a new path whenever we were ready to make that change.
Did you have people ever trying to talk you out of that and just kind of be like, you need to be conventional, you need to have two incomes? Did you kind of get some pushback with that?
Bit. I have to say, so I lived less than half a mile, probably closer to a quarter mile than my sister and her family and my mom and dad, who were in the next neighborhood over. We could ride our golf cart over there. So even though they were very, very supportive of us being able to travel and do all of these things, they knew I really held close. They were so sad because my mom had both of her kids.
Yeah,
right
and the
there.
grandkids. Yeah.
And the grandkids, and they would come over and drop off stuff, and we could go take our golf cart to the grocery store and everything. And they were just, I think, really sad, but also sad but supportive. I mean, they've come on many of our trips. They've met us. They've flown out to see us on our trips and things like that. But that was the biggest thing was moving away from my parents and my sister and her family, because I'm very, very close to them. But yeah, there were some people I worked with that I told them when I said, okay, I'm not going to be coming back for the next school year. They were like, you're going to do what? Like, you're going to go and move to the middle of nowhere and you're going to go drive around the country? Like, this is what you're choosing to do? And it was a lot, but everybody was, I think, more intrigued than they were anything else, because a lot of people, for a lot of different reasons, don't end up making that jump. They stay.
It's scary.
It's super scary. Financially speaking, like, it's a massive shift. It's a lifestyle change. So everybody has to be in it. Like the kids we talked about, this is what we're going to do. This is what our day is going to look like. This is, how we're going to change. We're leaving the friends. We can come visit them, but they're not going to be with us all the time. My husband's job, he ends up moving jobs, and he commutes about 45 minutes every day to be closer. But it was one of the things that we all four talked about and really all had to buy in. And we still talk about that. Like, we all have to buy into this idea to make it work.
How did the kids manage that change? Were they pretty excited about, to be homeschooled? And had you guys done travel like to parks before this? So did they kind of already know a little bit about what that would look like on trips and things like that? Or was it all brand new?
Yeah. So I have always I've always been that person that's like, I will spend the rent check to go somewhere instead of like being responsible.
I know we'd be friends.
And so ever since my kids were very, very small, I have tried to take every possible opportunity to, even if it's just to go to the Children's Museum in downtown Charleston, or to take them to a park, or take them to a local hiking trail. We've tried to get out as much, try to expose them as much as we possibly could. But they had both traveled sort of extensively. My son was born in 2016, very late in 2016. So just he was getting that cute little toddler, like, let's go on the plane. COVID hit. And so we were truncated on that. But my daughter, who's almost 12 now, she had several good years in there when she was a little kid that Like we took her to Germany and Luxembourg, and she'd been
Oh,
to Disney
awesome.
World, and she'd been like down to Florida, the Everglades and things like that. They were really excited. My daughter, who's my older child, she is a social being. And so I was most worried about her, right? Like, what am I going to do if I take her out of this setting where she's got 15 other kids to talk to all
Mm-hmm.
day, every day, and just put her in a car with me for talking, like, what is this going to look like? But she has adapted beautifully. We're a part of a co-op here. And so we see people regularly. They're very involved in dance. So she gets those moments of socialization.
Yeah.
We have really great neighbors in the area that we live in. So we're constantly talking to people. When we're out on the road, she is the one who she introduces me to people, which I think is
I
hilarious because
love this.
you've never met a stranger. She'll go up and we'll be in a park and she'll say, I wonder, when is this lake man-made? Or, how old are these trees? And then she'll go, oh, there's a ranger. I'll go ask. She just, next thing I know, we're best friends with Ranger Ashley, and she's telling us all about the technology of the park. So she really has been, she gets me out of my shell, which is awesome when we're on the road.
I love
My
that.
younger child, who's now 8, he is a little bit more reserved. So he's not the one running up to the rangers and everything, but he has always, I think, wanted to read more, wanted to do more than what a traditional classroom would allow him to. So he is great at math. He's 2 grade levels ahead in math. We can kind of push through that at our own pace, which is really, really nice. He can't stand English, which kills my satellites. Gone down really, really hard. But he is the kid that goes out and he'll buy a book at the park bookstore and he'll come back and 2 hours later, he's just reading you. Did you know about this fun fact about these volcanoes? Did you know this fun fact about the geysers
Cool.
here? He
Yeah.
teaches me sometimes with all that. So
Oh my
he has this
gosh, I
kind of
love that.
innate quest for knowledge that is just fed by all of our traveling.
Yeah. So walk us through a day. If you guys are traveling, how do you do schooling? What does a typical day look like? I mean, I'm sure there's got to be like a level of chaos to it at some point too. So to
Oh
go
my
honestly,
God.
how does it a normal day shape up when you guys are on the road?
Right. So I'll use a couple examples from our last major road trip, which we did 8 weeks out west last summer. We ended up driving about 9,700 miles, which is just crazy to think about how far that actually is. But so there were several days where we were just in the car trying to get from South Carolina, where we live, just out west, basically.
Mhm.
And so we would spend 6, 7, 8. One of our days was 11 hours, just me trying to get us into
As
close.
far as you
close
could. Yeah.
Right. And so those days we have a rule. So the kids carry their math and they carry English around with them all of the time. And so before they can get on their tablets, before they can read, on their personal books, before they can
Mhm.
color, they like doing crafts and things like that in the car. They have to do one of the math lessons that I've laid out for them. And then they also have to do their reading and then any associated like reading comprehension or grammar that I have set out for them as well. So those are our 2 core subjects that we do every day, whether we're driving, before we go into a park, before we go hiking. The kids are both kind of morning people. So a lot of times they'll do that while we're having breakfast or one of them's getting ready, the other one's doing their core subjects. And then if we're still on the road, we might listen to a podcast to learn about history or science. Or, like I said, my son is always carrying a book around, usually about science. So he'll give us lots of fun facts and we'll all learn together with him. It's a lot easier to do the science, the history, kind of those deep dive subjects. Language, we'll do, Spanish, or we'll talk about French or Latinate languages as we're just exploring the world. And so we might go to a museum and we'll talk about the history there. Or we might go to, one of the park interpretive centers and we'll look at the biology or the wildlife that's there. And so that gives us a starting point for a lot of conversations. And so a lot of times I will say, they'll ask me a question that maybe isn't covered by the interpretive materials or the museum. So I'll try and have either a running list in my head or even type it in my phone. So when we get back to our camper, we'll say, all right, hey, you asked me that question before. I've got Wi-Fi and 5 minutes to look it up, Natalie.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about all those things. So the traveling sort of informs the learning, but then the learning also informs the travel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of goes hand in hand. I've even planned trips to make the kids kind of think about some of the stuff that we've learned about. So
That's cool.
it's constantly evolving, that whole process, but it's crazy. If you actually sat and wrote down everything you learn in a day, you'd be surprised, even as an adult, the number of things you just naturally are like, oh,
Just
I
absorb.
wonder. Yes, right. Exactly. And you look it up on your phone. We don't think about it, but that's learning. That's us trying to teach ourselves, even though we're far more structured than that. And I know some people aren't, which is cool too, that do kind of like the unschooling just as the kids learn as they go. I'm still a classroom teacher through and through, and I like to have my worksheets. I like to have all the stuff planned out. So
Nothing wrong with that. I was just thinking while you were talking, I just got back from a trip to Macon, Georgia. Have you guys been to Okmulgee Mounds?
We have driven past it at least a dozen times, and
I
I've
was thinking
never.
your son would like it because
Yes.
it's oh my gosh, the history of it is actually just mind-blowing. And it's getting ready to be our next national park, which will be the first national park in Georgia. It's sitting in Congress right now. It was really close to being done, and then with the administration change, everything kind of reset. So
Right.
it's still like in line, but it's just kind of, stalling or whatever. But it's the
Mhm.
biggest archaeological find in North America. And
Oh, I would
they
love
have
that.
oh my gosh, they have like the original like flooring for some of the mound houses and the setup like of the skylights. It was like I call it a skylight, is where the smoke came out and they had the
Yeah.
ceremonies. It is so, so cool. And during the summer, what we just did, we went during the day and hiked around, but they also do like a lantern hike at night. So you go out there at night and the rangers are at different stations and they're dressed up like different explorers and people that kind of tell you the history through their eyes. One of the guys was
Mhm.
showing us like drawings of the plants that he had made and pictures of the maps that he had made of the area. And it was really cool just to walk through the mounds and you go to kind of all these different people and learn the history
Mhm.
that way. And that's a really cool one. And it's kind of close to you guys. It's not that far.
Why? I
So
mean, Georgia, I feel like is like woefully underexplored by us, even though it's our next door neighbor. I mean, we live not
yeah.
even 2 hours from the border. So we're going to have to do that. We want to do a Georgia road trip just to
Yeah.
go.
And I would go before it's an actual national park, so it'll be less
Yes,
busy.
yes. I was there before it became famous.
Uh-huh. I made it famous.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Yes, guys.
So that's really cool. So what do you think is maybe like something that the kids have learned out and about that they wouldn't have learned in school? Do you think that it's given them a broader view? Do you think there's been that one moment where you're like, oh my gosh, yes. Like, or is it just a culmination of all the little moments?
Right. It's really interesting to see what each one of them picks up because they do have such different learning styles. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but my daughter has pretty intense ADHD. So she doesn't like sitting at the table when we have a schoolroom here in the house and we'll do our writing and we'll do our reading and we'll do our math and everything or history worksheets. And she really struggles with like where she has to get up and she'll have to move around just to have that physical energy. But when we're actually out and about, I feel like she learns and retains so much more because her body is able to move as we walk around wherever we are reading placards,
Yeah.
talking to people, which is so immersive. And I think that's how all of us learn better, honestly. But we did a year and a half of American history because I don't think American history is taught enough. I know people get it in school, but like I remember doing American history and we never seemed to get past World War One. Like you just run out of time. So I don't know what happens after 1919. Who knows? So we ended up just getting so involved in our studies that the kids were still really, really interested. And I'm like, we're going past World War One. We're gonna make it at least to the Korean War. We actually made it all the way up to kind of present day, which was really cool. And we learned all the presidents and everything. But they were most interested in the early stuff, right? So like the Native Americans and
Yeah.
how, Trail of Tears. And I told you about the Sitting Bull. We went out and saw Battle of Little Bighorn. They were really, really into that whole thing. Another part they were super, super interested in was the very, very early European settlers. So we actually got to take them down to St. Augustine. We got to go to Castillo de San Marcos down there and look at how the Spanish were actually colonizing what is now America. And then we
Yeah.
actually went up to Jamestown and we saw how the English were colonizing that part. Turns out the Spanish knew what they were doing way more than the English. They just did not make it. But while we were in Jamestown, the National Historic Site there, there were a bunch of archaeologists who were digging down into this huge pit that they had created by the church. And they had actually found a gun earlier in the day while we were there. And so, of course, my daughter is like, I have so many questions. I mean, we stayed there and they were the nicest people. They answered all of our questions. And it was mind blowing to me. And the kids just were laser focused on the archaeologists
That's
because
so
I
cool.
just been telling them in the book, like this happened in the very early 1600s. And here we
Yeah.
are looking at a gun that's been
And
stuck
here
in the
it
ground.
is. Yeah.
Right. Here it is. So that was one of those moments where they were like, this is real. Like, you're not just making all this up, reading it to us, right, Mom?
But it's so much easier to care about things too once you've witnessed something like that, or it is real. It's not just words, take the test, move on. It
Right.
matters more because you're like, oh, yeah, I saw that. Yeah, that's so
Right.
cool.
Right. Because it's not just a book. Like you can think back to that memory and it has a smell, it has a feel, like it has
Mhm.
weight associated to it. And I feel like even though I grew up in a tradition, I went to Catholic school, I had a very traditional upbringing. I remember I was obsessed with British literature. I took this 11th grade class. I had an amazing teacher. And then for my senior year, my parents said, would you rather have a car to go to college or would you rather choose somewhere to go over spring break in your senior year? And me being ever non-practical, picked the trail, and I just walked everywhere. I took this clunker car to college and we ended up going to England for 11 days. And that was the first time I'd been on cruises and stuff to the Bahamas, but I'd
Mhm.
never been to Europe before. And walking through the streets and say, Shakespeare walked here, and just going in and seeing Poets Corner and Westminster Abbey and all of these people I've been reading about and honestly just been obsessed with my entire 11th grade year, seeing that Chaucer, Shakespeare, all of them, right? It was mind blowing. And that was, I
Mhm.
think, that's really where a lot of my obsession started, was when I was about 17, 18, that, oh, wow, this is real. It's not just
Yeah.
something in a book. It's actual people that lived in actual places that I can go see. And it just deepens the experience so much. I think.
Absolutely. I love that you can give that to your kids. That's just so cool.
We're trying. Some days they think it's the absolute worst.
I'm sure, because at the end you're still their parent and you can't do anything right.
Exactly. There's only so much I can do to get around that.
I know. What are you gonna do, right? Yeah. Let's see. Tell me about Brantley Lake. Did you ever?
Yes. So
Yeah.
that was part of the first big trip that I had planned. We had done, like I mentioned before, we had taken more traditional vacations, to the Gulf Coast of Florida, and we had been down to the Everglades. We had done smaller trips here and there. But the 6-week trip that I planned, the first late spring, early summer that we lived in our current house, that was the longest that I had ever been away from home, other than when I studied abroad in London when I was in college. But it was absolutely the longest that my kids had ever been away from home, by a factor of 8. I mean, they've gone to see their grandparents and stuff, but 6 weeks away from home was massive. And my husband
Yeah.
wasn't going to with us until the very end, the last 11 days. And so their grandfather came out for part of it. My mom flew out for part of it. So we still had people there to help me, but you're still in a camper 1,500 miles away from your home doing something that they had been camping, but again, never for 6 weeks moving around, doing all these national parks and things. So that was that weighed on my soul a lot, that I was taking them away, that they wouldn't see their dad for 4.5 weeks just because he couldn't get off work to go with us the whole time. And they struggled with that after about the fourth day. They were like, wait, but Daddy's not going to work. He's not going to be here for another month. So they were very, very excited about that possibility because they just think, oh, endless vacation. But it took so much of myself to know that this is going to work out. Like, this is a huge undertaking. It took a massive amount of planning to figure out where I was going to be every night for 6 weeks, because I'm used to planning, 7-day vacation, much less something a month and a half long. And so when we had just kind of booked it out there, we had stayed 3 nights, just basically long enough to sleep as we were driving out to New Mexico. And Carlsbad Caverns was the first thing that we were going to go do. So I booked us a site at Lake Brantley State Park, which is not far from Carlsbad, New Mexico. And the sun, we'd gotten everything hooked up and the sun was going down. The kids were playing on their scooters. And I was nearly in tears. Like, I did it. I drove this whole way, 2/3 of the way across the United States. I quit my job and we're doing this thing. It was one of those things where you kind of imagine it, that you can do it, but then the actual reality of it's like, pinch me. I really did it, right? So
you
just
did.
that moment of yes, you can do hard things. You can plan these things. The kids are going to be okay. They're resilient and they can be away from their dad for a little bit. We'll call him. He's still there. He's it was a lot to get to that point. Just a lot of self-doubt, a lot of, am I doing the right thing? Is this wild? Should I just wait till I'm retired? But then kind of seeing how happy the kids were and all of the possibilities that laid ahead of us for the next 5.5+ weeks was just, it was such a cool feeling. I wish I could replicate that, but now, I'm jaded and I've done it. So
Yeah, no, that's so awesome. It was so nice to think back on those times, though, because you still get that little rush of like, oh, yeah,
right.
I did that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That first one is always the most special. So what would your
It
advice
is.
be for a mom who's listening now and maybe has been playing with the idea of the same thing, but is a little bit scared to take the leap? What would you say to her?
I would say you are braver and stronger than you think that you are. You can do more things than you think you can do, even if it seems absolutely overwhelming in the moment. The planning, there were so many times when my husband and I were trying to figure out the logistics where we're going to sell our house and we're going to quit our jobs and he's going to get a different job and I'm going to take on this whole other job that's unpaid, but it's still weighs on my soul knowing that my education, the education of my children's future, is on me, is a lot. Even as a lifelong educator, there were many times when we thought, we just can't do this, is too hard, right? When in reality, the decision never gets easier. Even if you plan it out and feel better about it, you still at some point have to walk in to your department's head's office and say, well, yeah, I'm not going to be here next semester. I am moving. I am going to go do this thing. And that was still just as terrifying when I did it as the moment that I first was like, okay, I think I need to start making moves to actually do this. So yeah, just jump in with both feet. Of course, do the finances, make sure that all of that, I would call the boring stuff actually.
I'm already here ready to jump.
Works out the spreadsheets. He's the banker. He is absolutely the planner, and I'm just the dreamer. So we figure out together what to do. But yeah, if you had told me 3-4 years ago this is what I was going to be doing, I would say, oh, I made it happen. I did all of the things that I wanted to do. Well, not all of them, but I'm at least on the pathway doing all of the things. So it's scary. It's very scary, but you can do it, would be my advice.
Love that. Thank you. Oh my gosh, you've had so much wisdom and I'm so excited just listening to you. I wish my kids were small again so I could rip them out of school and go that sounds amazing.
Figure it out.
Where is your next trip?
So we are actually going to go on an East Coast road trip, which I've been sort of putting off because growing up, my parents very much like they were all about travel. My mom, especially, and my dad was always game for it. So we drove up and down the Eastern Seaboard. We drove to Canada one time. My dad is
Yeah.
also in banking. And back in the day, you used to have to take a certain number of days off because I guess they wanted to make sure you weren't cooking the books or something. So they physically made you step away from your job before computers. So my dad was always available to go on these really long road trips. So we would drive to the Florida Keys or to New York. Like I said, we went to Prince Edward Island one year. So I feel like I was sort of, oh, I've already done the East Coast, having grown up and lived here my whole life. But then I thought, well, my kids haven't, we haven't, I haven't taken, yeah,
Yeah.
we haven't, we went to Shenandoah a couple years ago. So we're going to go back there. We're going up and we're just doing Maine. We're doing a big loop through like Vermont, New Hampshire, coming down, doing Shenandoah again, and then New River Gorge, which we haven't been to. We've
Fun.
driven past it a bunch of times, but I've never stopped. We're just really excited because it's closer.
Yeah.
I look at the amount of time I'll be driving each day versus where I was driving last summer, going
Yeah.
all the way up to Montana, and I'm like, 2 hours. This is a piece of cake, I can
Doable.
totally,
So doable.
like maybe 3 days. I'll see the whole thing, but no, we're actually going to take about 5.5 weeks to go up to Maine and back and see all of it.
Amazing. Oh, very good. All right. So tell everyone where they can find you. Your blog is called campingkiddos.com, right? And
Yes,
where else can they
camping.
find you?
So you can also
Instagram?
find me on Instagram. I'm camping.kiddos, and I'm trying to post more regularly. Being an English professor, I'm always about the writing. But, I like people like pretty pictures and funny videos too. So come join me over on Instagram.
Love that. All right. Thank you so much. This was so amazing.
Absolutely.
right.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks so much for listening to Go Far Girl. If this episode made you smile, dream a little bigger, or realize it's never too late to book the trip, I'd be so grateful if you'd share it with a friend. And hey, we've got an amazing group of women waiting for you inside our Facebook community. Just search Go Far Girl, come on in and say hi. Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and never stop going far.